Hello, folks out there. This episode of the podcast is partnered by Audible. Greg, you know what I love about Audible?
What do you love about Audible,
I
John?
don't have to pick up a book anymore and carry it around with me. In fact, I carry it around in my phone, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. They literally keep thousands of titles right on your phone, accessible at any time when you're driving, when you're cooking, when you're mowing the lawn, changing a diaper, doesn't matter. It's all right there at your fingertips, John. They've got podcasts, they've got lectures, they've got some like health and wellness and like fitness series on there that if you just are looking for something to fill that gap, like you're not getting into a book right now, it's all there for you, man.
If you're a member, Greg, what's cool about it is you get 3 titles per month. The first one, you can pick whatever you want. Like I've said, I'll probably start hitting up some of those health and wellness books. And then what's awesome is they have 2 Audible exclusives. Exclusives, folks. You can't get it anywhere else.
It's true. That is very true. So if you guys want to get on the Audible train, you can go to audibletrial.com/JATG. That stands for Johnny and the Greg. Hook yourself up with a 30-day free trial. No promises, no nothing. If you don't like it, which I can't imagine you're not going to like it, you can cancel at any time. But the great thing about that is the books you get during your free trial, or if at any time, those books are yours. Like you get to keep them. You can listen to them nonstop, anytime, all the time.
Sounds like a deal to me, man. So if you guys are smart, like I know you guys are, because you already listen to this podcast, sign yourself up, guys. What do you got to lose? It's 30-day free trial, and it's books, it's knowledge. Gotta drink it up.
It is. It is. So one more time, it is audibletrial.com/JATG.
Our guest with us today is Dan Krieg. How'd you think it went, Greg?
Oh, it was fun. Dan seems very much like if we lived in the same geographic area, we'd hang out.
Yeah,
We'd
I agree
be
with you.
gaming, we'd be talking movies, we'd be sharing podcast stuff. So yeah, it was a good time.
It was a good time. I don't know about the gaming part for me, but the other stuff for sure. But that's what makes us unique and wonderful, and that's why you guys are listening. So, without further ado, everybody, our guest, Dan Krieg.
Hit it.
Hit it. What's up, Dan Krieg? How are you?
Good. How's it going with you guys?
Good. Very good. We are talking today with Dan Krieg, who is a stand-up comic as well as a podcast host. How's it going, man? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So here's something that Greg and here's the thing about Greg and I, we're very honest. Were we in the same yearly class? Because you seem to have reached out to us through Facebook, and I didn't know who you were, but I started listening to your podcasts.
No, I mean I'm totally in the same boat. I mean, I think we certainly ran in similar circles.
Okay.
I think so.
And I don't know what time you guys started Whitewater. I had kind of a break in there.
Oh, did you?
So I started in 97.
Okay. I was 96.
Yeah, I started in 96 as well.
Okay.
So where'd you live?
And then were you guys, I mean, I know like the Johns and all that. Did you guys meet them through the TV station?
I don't know.
John Faust?
John Faust and John Steyer.
John Faust. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I met Faust. So I was an education major and friends with John, and John talked me into taking the 5-credit theater course for non-theater people, whatever that was. I think it's called Intro to Theater. And Faust happened to be in that class at the same time. And so that's how I got to know Faust, and then just hanging out with the theater group.
So you guys weren't on the radio or involved in the TV station at all?
No, I was involved in the TV station for a little bit, but no, not to the extent that I actually probably should have.
Yeah.
I
giving
was
me-
supposed to do some stuff, but I always found a way to get out of it. But probably shouldn't have gone that route either.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
for some reason, honestly, Greg seems more familiar to me than Johnny. I don't know if maybe it's just I bumped into you a few times at some of John Faust's
Sure.
parties or what have you. I'm not sure.
Well, it's not like it was a huge campus.
Yeah.
I was recognizable as the dude wearing a black trench coat, black leather trench coat, and a Superman sweatshirt. Like
All
I
right.
wore those around a lot.
Oh my God, that's right, Greg. You did wear a trench coat.
I did.
That's
I really
right.
did. I don't know why.
And your nickname was Lady Slayer, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, same, sure. Absolutely. That was me. I felt it was the Superman sweatshirt that really tipped it off. It was even like that was before the Matrix had even come out, so I don't know why I really was digging on the
Ahead
black
of your time,
trench.
sir. Ahead of your time.
No. Terminator 2.
So Dan, you're a stand-up comic.
Well, I mean, I think that's being a bit generous. I mean, I certainly did do stand-up comedy. I did it. My first time ever was when I was 21. And then I did it for a number of years. I also did some improv and sketch comedy and things like that. My one slight cool thing about improv is that I was a member of the Arc Improv troupe in Madison, which was the group that Chris Farley was in briefly before he moved to Chicago, before he moved on to bigger and better things. So I was not no crossover or anything like that, but then I moved to New York to further pursue stand up, and I did it a little bit, but I didn't. At a certain point, I met my current wife, and then we got married, and we moved back here. I'm sorry, I currently live in California, so
Okay.
we ended up moving to California. We had our kids, all that stuff. So I was kind of out of stand up for a while because stand up is a really difficult thing. Like it's fine if you're like a single dude in your 20s, but it's hard if you're in a relationship or if you have kids. I mean, it's such a demanding amount of time
on the road.
Right. And it's, you can spend 3 hours to do 5 minutes and have a more miserable time. And you're like, why did I do that to myself? And it, I don't know. So I just kind of fell out of it, and I had the urge to kind of get back into it. I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I was like, I don't know what the purpose is, because I'm not going to go on the road. I have a 6-year-old and twin 3-year-olds. I'm not going to go on the road. I don't want to like go do, go to even a local comedy club to us and do like, 5 shows over a weekend. Cause it's, what's the point, it's such a demanding thing for a family, but, so I said that, it's kind of thinking like, I want to do it, but what's it going to lead to? I'm not going to push it hard enough to get anywhere with it. And my buddy was like, well, sometimes it's just good to be creative. So I was like, all right. So I started doing it locally to me again. And then COVID hit. So that kind of slammed that shut. But that is something, when COVID lifts, I will start pursuing again.
What do you find besides obviously the whole idea of a family and trying to go do stand up, where I hear that like you have to, if you want to be successful at it, you have to travel. You have to go from club to club and almost live that lifestyle. I would think that's really difficult, especially if you want to be a family man. Does that make sense when I'm saying? Is that what you're basically saying there?
Yeah, I mean, for every Ray Romano and for every Jim Gaffigan, there's just hundreds of guys. When I was in when I started thinking about doing stand up, I don't know if you did you listen to my interview with the comic who came through, who's now a writer for SNL? I'm blanking on his name. I would talk to the comics as they came through, and then that was just kind of my style. I just like to talk to people and kind of get their input and their feedback and things like that. And that continued when I started doing comedy in Madison. I would be at the comedy club on State often. That was a great place to do comedy. And I would talk to the features and headliners that would come in, and almost all of them had no family life. Like if they had kids, they never saw them. I rarely met one that was, not divorced, so it's like one of those things where it's like, if you want to sign up for that, if you have that power and drive to kind of sacrifice that stability, all the power to you. But I mean, even guys that are well known, like it's that Bert Kreischer guys. Yeah. He talks about how much he's on the road, and he's he's not like top tier, but he's like, as far as comics go, pretty high up on the order, and he even talks about how hard it is. So so I don't consider myself a comic first and foremost. It just so happens that was the thing over the course of my life that I've done the most. So I feel like that's like the thing I have the most skill in. It's just a tough thing to ask.
Sure. What's your day job?
Well, I currently don't have one.
Well,
I was a teacher for a little bit, most recently. But I ended up, my wife is doing quite well. And so it came to the point where, as a teacher, you have set hours, obviously. And as a teacher, you don't just work those hours. You also have the lesson prep and all the grading of papers, all that stuff.
I was 15 years.
There you go. I was a special ed teacher, so there was less grading of papers, but more IEPs and things.
So wait, was that what you went to Whitewater for?
No.
Okay.
Well, I ended up leaving Whitewater after almost 9 years, not sequentially, like dropping out, coming back, dropping out. Sure. I walked away with an English major and a philosophy minor.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked is that I was a special ed major at Whitewater. So when we're talking about like, where did you see me? If you're in a special ed program at a college in the mid 90s, there were like 4 dudes. But like I said, 20 or 300. Yeah. So that was.
I was thinking in the back of my head, I would most likely, as an English major, have to become a teacher at some point. But I didn't take any education classes at Whitewater, and I basically just limped away because I was just kind of done with school, with those degrees. And then that's when I moved off to New York.
Where did you grow up?
In Mukwonago.
Oh, sure. Okay. Sure.
I was born in Milwaukee, but we moved to Mukwonago when I was 5.
All right.
So I like asking this question, Dan, when I find, do you ever see the movie Little Nemo?
Sure.
Okay. You see the part where they what's that?
I have kids, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So you probably have memorized it by now. The part where they go, "Oh, you're a clownfish. Say something funny. Go ahead, do it." Right? Yeah. Do you find that when people found out that you have either done stand-up or that you were in that mold or that time period where you were doing stand-up, did you find that people were trying to put you on the spot a lot, going, "All right, say something funny"?
Well, when you led with the stand-up comedy thing, it's one of those things where I kind of avoid bringing up just because I don't want those expectations of like, because I do tend to be really dry, and I'm not one of those people that are on, that want people to, I'm not looking to become the center of attention or anything. So it's always kind of a awkward thing. I mean, I think my strength in stand-up comedy is being more of an observer, so I like to kind of look at from a distance. And so I'm not in there causing the action. I'm kind of watching things that happen.
Right.
And then kind of communicating that in certain ways. So it certainly is kind of an awkward thing. And it's funny because I get, when I talk to comics that were coming through Whitewater there, and I would ask them all these questions about stand-up, a few of them were like, "Are you funny?" I was like, I think so, it just, and even when I told some of my friends I was going to do stand up, a couple of my friends, were kind of surprised by that. It's just, I just don't have, that like Robin Williams in me or whatever.
Sure,
right. Yeah, of course.
God, who does?
And I've been told by comedians a lot when I talk to them, like, because there are so many comedians that are wired that way that they enjoy talking to me because I'm just kind of there and I'm not trying to cause laughs or I'm not testing punchlines and things like that. Right. So I don't know.
what made you want to do stand up? Like what made you? Because look, I think Greg's a funny guy. I think I'm a little bit funny, but I don't think we're stand up funny. I think it's a different set of courage that can like you can stand up and you're basically vulnerable. You got that spotlight on you and you're gonna tell a joke and you gotta make somebody laugh. And that takes a lot of courage. I think it does. And so my question to you is really what made you like take the jump? What made you take that chance?
Well, when I was really young, I used to say I wanted to be a comedian / actor because I was such a fan of SNL and I didn't know how else to describe what they did.
Right.
And I did like Dana Carvey's impression of George Bush, and I did, Matt Foley and all that stuff, I did skits in like middle school and things like that. But then, you kind of hit that awkward phase, where your self-esteem kind of takes a hit and you kind of, it's kind of like that. I don't know how it was for you guys, but I kind of hit a point where I was like, well, those people on TV are just these unattainable people. They're just like from a different planet than me. Like I could never be that person. Like I'm just some dude in the middle of Wisconsin. There's nothing particularly special about me or whatever. And I felt that way for a while, but I had a few different friends separately tell me like, oh, that's really funny. You should be a comedian. Like that didn't, it's like totally different, and when they said that to me, I was like, no, but in the back of my head, I was like, really? Should I, And even like giving speeches in high school and college, like I never was the kid who volunteered. They always asked the kids who volunteered first and then they went through the rest. I never volunteered, but I was always so happy when I eventually was forced to get up there. And I would felt nervous and I felt like my knees were shaking and things like that.
Right.
But like it just jokes would come out or like little one-liners or whatever. And I would get a few laughs and it was just like, I would just love it,
Right. There's like an addiction to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then I remember this is a really important thing to me too, is they used to have the show on VH1 before they were stars. You guys remember that show?
Oh,
yes.
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
They have like George Clooney's yearbook or something like that, or somebody, in a high school play or something like that. And I remember this one section where they did before they were stars comedians, and they had like a super young Chris Rock, a super young Conan O'Brien, and a few others. And when I watched it, I mean, like when you watch Chris Rock in this, you could see where he eventually ended up. Like you can see like the little glimmers of what would eventually become.
Yeah.
But what they were doing at that point, it wasn't that amazing. And I was like, oh, these were just people at one point that they weren't from another planet.
Right.
They just had something and then spent years developing
that. Yeah.
There wasn't anything that they had that I didn't have. So that I remember that point, and really like after I saw that was when I started kind of thinking in the back of my head, yeah, I want to give it a go.
Yeah.
And so I started watching the comedians that would come through the college there at Whitewater. And I remember thinking like not in a like a cocky way, but I just for some reason knew that I could do what they were doing. So at the very least, like they seemed to be making a living doing comedy. So at the very least, I could do what they're doing. So like I asked them questions and things like that. And then I thought I had to wait till I was 21. So once like a month after my 21st birthday, me and my friend Josh went down to Chicago, and I did stand up for the first time and got in a car accident on the way back, but we lived.
Gosh, damn.
And did stand up a few more times, and then that's kind of it.
Yeah. Did you so there was a short time when you were a stand-up comedian where that was your income?
No, that was never. I was never a full-time comic. There was shows I got paid.
Yeah.
But I would never. I always had day jobs.
A day job. Okay. All right. So
that's something that has shocked me, even with different actors and whatnot. I mean, I was listening to a podcast with is it Wendy McCovey? I think is her name, from Reno 911. She's on the Goldbergs. Super funny on Reno 911 and funny on the Roadworks too. But when she was filming Reno 911, that was like, she's like, we would shoot for at most like 6 or 7 weeks. And then they would edit the show together, and then they didn't get back together again until the next season. So during that time, and especially when Reno was like blowing up huge, she was working at it was a magazine for sewing patterns, and she would help put those together, like put the catalog together to be shipped out. And she's like, I was doing that 6, 7 seasons into Reno, and I was like, you're kidding me, because like at that point she's getting offered to be in Bridesmaids. She's like, that was kind of the breaking point of like, hey, we want you to come film, this giant movie called Bridesmaids. It's going to be huge. And she's like, I'm going to have to quit my catalog job.
It's like, well, that's the thing too, though. Those Comedy Central shows, I mean, they didn't have much of a budget. I can't imagine she was making that much money.
I can't think so. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it.
I mean, it was only like the superstars on Comedy Central that were making a lot of money, like South Park guys and Jon Stewart and stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Dan, it sounds to me like I must have misunderstood kind of what you did, but I'm glad I did, because I kind of feel like you and I are kind of a kindred spirit. Greg can attest to this. I wanted to be a Hollywood actor. Like that was, and let me know if I'm wrong here, but I felt like I went out to California, and I'm not going to go into what happened in California. Greg knows a little bit more about it than most people, but there was this moment where I asked myself, are you willing to do this sacrifice? Are you willing to make these sacrifices to get to a chance that maybe this could happen? And I wasn't willing to take that sacrifice. Is that kind of where you're at? Like family was like way more important than whatever little like itch you needed to scratch?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel, I also, the first time I dropped out of Whitewater, what the plan was, after I'd done stand up 4 times, at that time, it was kind of the mindset that you basically had to pick a coast. You either had to move to New York or LA.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I that's not the case, but that's what everyone thought, and that's what I thought. I didn't know any better. So I moved to LA. Well, I shouldn't say moved. I mean, I drove out in my car, and I lived in my car for a couple weeks, and basically almost signed a lease. Although at that point, I mean, I'd such a sheltered life. I'd never signed a lease before. I just been living in the dorms. I don't know, I didn't have like basic living skills. I was very sheltered.
Yeah.
And so I basically, I knew how much money it cost me for gas and some food on the way out. So as soon as I reached the point where I had just enough money for gas and food, I then was like, well, what am I doing? And I bailed and went back. So that was my aborted attempt to move to LA. But I also feel like for a long time, I was in this mindset of like waiting for somebody to come to me and say like, hey, you want to be in a sitcom? And I'd be like, sure. Like that.
Yeah. That's funny you said that. I felt that way, same way too. That there was going to be this moment where they were going to knock on your door and say, hey, we need you to be the next Anakin Skywalker or something.
Jake Boyd dropped out. We need you.
Yeah, right. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
Oh no, that was basically it. I don't know how long you were in LA for.
I think I was there a hot minute. I was not there long. I was like 2 weeks, and I was like, and I went to a party, and that's about as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to tell you what party I went to, but there was a decision I had to make, and I didn't want to make that decision. So I realized that it just wasn't for me.
Well, so you knew you wanted to have a family and all that? You knew that you.
You know what? I always wanted to have wife, kids, always wanted. I think I was more in love with the idea of that than I was in love with anything else, to be honest. So I always knew that was the path I wanted to go.
I mean, I know people that just grind and go audition to audition and maybe book something once out of every 40 auditions. I mean,
right.
Somebody like Johnny Lechner, I mean, he's been out in LA and he's still grinding, you know.
Yeah.
So that's certainly, I couldn't do that with my kids, you know, and all that, you know, I couldn't do that in my current situation. I also don't have the fortitude to get so many no's to my face in a row. Like I don't have the self-esteem or whatever it would require to kind of grind my way through that.
Right. No, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the people that can sit there and grind that and keep a family together, all props to you. I just, I believe that there's a certain amount of percentage of your energy you can give to certain things like work, family. I just became a dad, so I pretty much at the time, I guess for a long time I could have just dragged my wife through all that, but I don't know. I just didn't want to do it after a while. After a while, it just didn't seem like it wasn't my path, and I realized it. So anyway, but I always think it's fascinating when I meet somebody that gives it a shot again, fails, gives it another shot again. I think for a long time in the beginning of that adventure for me, I was afraid of failing more than anything, but afraid of failing to the point where I wouldn't even try because I didn't want to fail. Does that make sense? So it's I didn't even give it a shot. I just was because I was afraid I'd fail at it. So why give it a shot? I didn't want to go home and be a disappointment or any of that pressure I built up in my own head.
Oh yeah, right there with you. Yeah.
Yeah. But so how did you get into the podcast? Because I feel like we're kindred spirits, and I felt like, okay, you and I want to be part of something like this, but we want to be on our own terms. Right?
Right. Well, I mean, I started listening to podcasts when I lived in New York because I only ever had one job in New York. I worked for this company that would put on these events, these kind of galas and things. Yeah, charity events. The best one was the at the time coach of the Giants, John Coughlin, had a cancer fund named after a former player of his from Boston College who had died of cancer. And so a bunch of Giants and Jets players would come. Companies would buy tables and they would kind of like sit with players and things like that. And they'd have like memorabilia they would auction off. And it just so happened to be one of the years was after they beat us in Lambeau and then went on to win the Super Bowl.
Beat us. You're talking about you're a Packer fan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my job for an hour and a half was standing next to the Super Bowl trophy. And they gave me like a special cloth that nobody was supposed to touch it except for the owner of the Giants could touch it. and I had to just, if somebody touched it, I just had to kind of wipe the smudge off of it. And of course she touched it. And also Kevin Boss's girlfriend touched it. So I had to kind of wipe off after Kevin Boss's girlfriend. He was a tight end for the Giants.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I started that story. So I listened to podcasts on that. I listened to the podcast on that job because there was a lot of going around the city, like bringing things to places, a lot of gophering and things.
Yeah.
And so I just had, hours during the day, and my commute and around the city listening to podcasts. So I just started listening to podcasts and continued. So I was a fan of the art form, whatever you call it. And I need to also talk about my wife a bit because the reason I don't have a job right now is because my wife is quite an accomplished filmmaker and photographer.
I was hoping we would get to that.
Yeah.
Because as I was, John says he contacted you, we're having you on. I'm like, great, I got to learn something. But the podcasts of yours that I did listen to, you do mention a lot of your wife. And she's a producer, she's a filmmaker. Like, there's a lot of different jobs that I've tried to pick up. So what does she do?
Well, she basically, she produces content for brands. She also is a photographer. She gets paid to do photography. Today she was taking headshots at a local hospital for some of the doctors that won awards.
Okay.
But she she has certain retainer clients that she has that she produces content every month. And then she has these kind of projects that come out of nowhere. And at a certain point, her career really started taking off and she was making way more money than me as a teacher. And it became unfair because I think I was going into this like 30 minutes ago. I had the teaching gig, and I had set hours as a teacher.
Sure.
And so I would have to go in early, do the teaching, come home, and then she would have to fit in her job after I came home. And it was unfair for her. She's making more than double what I'm making, and she has to like squeeze in her. And then it's also not ideal because it almost became like our kids became like this baton we would pass. Like we would never be a family together. It was just like, okay, you take the kids, I got to work now, kind of thing.
Right.
So at a certain point, it just made sense. She was having enough success that it made sense for me, especially with homeschooling and all that stuff with our kids currently. It made sense for me to quit my job.
Right.
So I currently do not have a job.
Stay-at-home dad, is that kind of?
Well, stay-at-home dad. I mean, I do. I'm sometimes her second shooter. I do produce this podcast with her, which helps her. Like it helps her because she does also teaching online, and so she has a few classes online. So the podcast is a way to kind of spotlight her and her classes. And so even if we don't make any money directly from the podcast, we end up making money from more people learning about her and more people getting to know her and liking her from the podcast, and then they'll take her classes.
So you work for your wife.
Yeah, I work for my wife.
I mean, I'm not. It's not that you're not. When you're like, I don't have a job. No, bro, you got a job.
Well, and we have this. This is actually my wife right here giving me a drink. Thank you.
Hello.
For who now? Hello.
But I do. We put out 2 podcasts a week right now, so it is quite a bit of work. I do go through and edit. It takes a while, and because I'm learning the technical stuff, like I'm not super technically savvy, so I'm kind of learning on the fly. But the whole reason I started my podcast was because I'd asked her to start a podcast because I knew it would do well. She's got a lot of people that know her in her little area, her little niche. I knew it would go well. And the first thought is like, well, why would anybody listen to a photography podcast? You can't see any pictures or whatever. But the reality is any photographers who do a lot of work spend hours and hours in front of a computer editing. And so they like podcasts because they can have something in the background while they're editing. So it's kind of like a perfect blend of people who are into photography and need something to kind of stimulate those long hours. So the only reason I started my podcast was kind of a proof of concept to learn the technology and show her that it's something that can be done and all that. And so we, so once we started the shared shutter, that became kind of my main gig. And my personal podcast is kind of like I'm never going to make money from my podcast. It's just purely like when I have the time. Like maybe when the kids go back to school full time, I'll become more consistent on my episodes. But we're already talking to sponsors, bringing on sponsors. When you have a real niche podcast like photography, it's a lot easier to find sponsors. You don't need you don't need like Joe Rogan sized numbers to get sponsors because everyone listening are photographers. So Sony, Canon, whoever, it's like a captive market. So that's really appealing.
Yeah. What do you like best about being a podcast? What do you like best about the podcast?
Well, I mean, it is, my wife and I do have good chemistry on the podcast. Like it's kind of an excuse to kind of ham it up together,
Yeah.
We have guests on, but we also have plenty of kind of back and forth and jokes and things. But it's also nice to hear the feedback and hear people who really enjoy the product and really get a lot out of it. And they talk about how we have people who have come back to us and say, like, I time my walks to your podcast,
that's awesome. Yeah.
So just to kind of be welcomed in that kind of universe. And we look forward to when COVID's gone, because we'll start going to some of the major photography conventions and have some live tapings and things like that.
That's awesome.
Cool.
That's very cool. With I hear California is crazy with COVID. Like the governor's like shutting down everything, right?
Well, I don't know. Um, well, it's for sure more restrictive than Wisconsin. Um,
Yeah.
I happen to live in a kind of rural area of California.
Okay.
So there isn't a lot of COVID around us. I mean, we're still careful. We wear masks and
Of course.
we keep our kids at home and all that. So it's probably kind of a blessing and a curse that it's not around us, because I feel like some people are kind of getting lax around us and not taking it, as seriously as I'd like them to.
COVID fatigue kind of piece,
What's that?
like that I think around here they call it COVID fatigue, where it's just you're just sick of staying inside and not doing stuff, and you just eventually get to the point where you're like, I'm going.
That's me. I'm at that point, and I know I have to be more respectful than I have in the past couple of weeks, but I'm getting fatigued big time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm totally with you. I just don't understand. I mean, people are such weird. We have such weird ways to process information.
Yeah.
The fact that any schools weren't planning from any point during the summer to, so many of them weren't planning on having distance learning, and it's like, well, how can you? We went to distance learning. Things have gotten worse. Why would we go back to in person, back to normal? Like, that makes no sense, And the fact that districts didn't spend their whole summers just planning for that is just weird to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of things have been shown in terms of when COVID hit. It's our structure's real fragile. I don't think we knew how fragile it was, or we did, and we just decided to ignore it and think that's not going to happen to us. Let's not worry about it. And I think a lot of people are so just, they want to get back to normalcy, and they're going to ignore stuff to get back to normalcy. And obviously that's not the way to go. That's a stupid way to go. But that is the human condition, where let's go back to normal. Or I've heard people say, and I'll be the first to admit, there's a part of me that thinks it too, and then I think, well, no, you can't do that for everybody, but that everybody should just kind of get it and go through it, and then we'll all be better. That's
the
just
herd immunity.
Yeah.
Swedish model.
What's that?
The Swedish model. That's what they did in Sweden.
Yep.
Did they do that in Sweden? What did they do in Sweden? What do you mean?
Well, that was their philosophy. They're like, let's just let us run its course and basically build up herd immunity. And a lot of people on the right kind of hold it up as some kind of model to strive for, but when you actually look at the numbers, it actually did really poorly. And Sweden itself is a poor approximation to America, because there's a few major cities and then lots of spread out rural areas.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
There's a bit of a population difference as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So, not to get off the heavy stuff, but I want to get off the heavy stuff. John had mentioned that, and I hadn't heard this because I didn't go through your entire catalog. I apologize. You have a problem with The Mandalorian?
Oh, I didn't bring it up in a podcast.
Okay.
No. He brought it up on Facebook, and everybody started getting at him about it.
Oh, that's what it was.
Did you happen to listen to my first episode?
With Omid? Yeah, I did. Okay. And that's the other thing. Maybe circle back around to that, but you get some great guests. I'm assuming from your wife's work that you're.
Well, a lot of them are through my wife. My wife, before all that, she was an actress and all that. So, and being an actress in LA, in that area, she knows a lot of people. So yeah, that's how we know Omid and a few of the others. Yeah.
Dan, you might just become our best friend. You never know.
Well, I listened to that, and shoot, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. That he owns the theater up north from you guys.
Oh yeah, okay.
What drew me into that one was the D&D reference, and he's like, he did that D&D show. I'm like, oh, I'm in, because I'm a gamer. So,
well, and he's I I'm hoping that their theater is able to survive. We've gone up there before. My wife's actually done her one woman show up there a couple times. But we hope that they can survive. They're obviously having a rough time because we'd love once everything passes to go up there and visit John Steiger's farm and get some weed from John Faust while we're up there.
There you go.
Kind of hit a trifecta.
Yeah.
So hopefully.
It's funny you said that about the theater. Greg and I had an episode on our podcast just talking about that reality that I'm more Greg and I are more on. It's funny. Greg is very. Greg, you can speak for yourself. I don't know what I'm talking about here.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
What I'm trying to say is like you're very into like save the theaters. It's important.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's a big part of Americana.
stage theaters. For me, there's a local small town movie theater that used to be a stage theater that he's transferred over. It's 3 screens. You know, he works really hard to be active in the community and does a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
And I would just hate to see that thing die because of this. And I think it's kind of a waiting game. Well, I hope it's a waiting game. I hope the studios don't just completely turn their backs on movie theaters and the theater association. But it's like he's got Freaky, the new Vince Vaughn slasher film from Blumhouse.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I went and saw that last Thursday. He had said, we're going to show it. Do you want to come see it? And I'm like, sure. And it's his big theater is 250 seats. And so when you've got, I think there were 20 people there, it's real easy to spread out and stay safe and socially distance. Yeah. And he's making everybody wear a mask and stuff like that. So it's doable. It's certainly not what it could be, but it's doable.
Right.
Well, and it's not like they were doing great before all this anyways. I mean, they were barely making,
Yeah. I'm on the other side where I think that it's
theater should die. That's where you're at.
I don't think this should die because I mean a big part of what I said about like you're gonna miss theater experiences. Like I can't pull it up, but we showed a clip of audience reaction to like MCU movies, like when Thor came down to Wakanda and how the crowd went nuts. You're not going to get that with 5 of your friends in your your movie studio or at your home theater system.
Right.
So that nostalgic part, that part that's going to give you those chills on the back of your neck are going to be gone. But I don't know, man. I think COVID just kind of sped this whole thing up in terms of we kind of don't need you if Disney Plus starts doing really well. Like if they finally release the Black Widow and it kills, it does great. On online
VOD,
it's going to send a red flare a flare to everybody that other studios that say, well, Warner Brothers, why can't we do that? Or Paramount, why can't we do that?
Right.
And it's just going to move that wave that I think is eventually going to happen, as well as Greg and I have also talked about the whole idea of malls being extinct. I just think that's the way it's going, and there's nothing you can stop it. And I think maybe the only way you can work with it is if you make it more of a nostalgia type of experience. Like this is what they used to do. This is what mom and dad used to do for dates.
Right. Or even like you have to do kind of like the fine dining / movie,
correct.
This kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I mean, I remember seeing, there's something about Mary with a packed audience and people going, laughing and all that. And I mean, I have these memories, but I mean, I also have memories of, I remember watching the movie Gravity, and there was like an older woman that kept asking who I assume is her daughter, just kept asking her questions. Like, and I feel bad. Like, I don't know what the situation was, but it ruined the movie for me.
Sure.
And you just can't control those things. It's kind of a wild card,
Yeah. Do you remember when Star Wars came out with their special edition?
Yeah.
I took my girlfriend and we went to go watch it, and we were the lucky ones that had a guy sit next to us and let us know and let the whole theater know what was new to the so he would just sit there and just in the middle of it, that's new right there, that's new. And it's like, Dick, I know. Like, what are you doing? Like, so that I would never miss that. Who's gonna miss that? Just like nowadays, it's really hard to go to watch a football game. You know, like the Bears and Vikings are playing now, and if you could go, no, I'm a wimp now. It'd be too fucking freezing to go over there and watch a game. You know?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I can't relate to that anymore. Being in California, I'm in shorts in my garage and I'm fine. But
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I never, I've been to a couple of Packer games. I don't think I'd ever want like season tickets. I mean, those bleachers are not comfortable, and it's like, why wouldn't I just want to be in a comfortable chair at home, and not be paying $12 for a beer or whatever it is?
Wait a minute, you don't want to wait in line to go take a piss?
Well, and I don't know. In those bleachers, like I went with my brother, and we're both pretty big guys, and there was like a big guy next to us, and like you kept, you'd stand up when there was a big first down or touchdown or whatever, and then you went down fast because you had to kind of grab your space, otherwise the guy would come down. You had to, you had to kind of get your territory ready. It was just,
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you get in those winter games when everybody's wearing like their deer hunting orange snow pants and giant jackets.
And you got your pieces of cardboard to put under your feet. And stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that stuff. You guys are right. I didn't think about that. But anyway, transitioning back
October
to
games. October games are what it's at.
Yeah, that's true. October. You don't want to go to September. September, you can get stuck in that spot where the sun's on you the whole time for 3 hours, and you just get baked. Yeah, no fun. But transitioning back to the theater experience, I don't see how it's gonna go back. Like,
well, there's, and maybe this is a weather issue for you guys, but there's been a lot of drive-in theaters kind of open up, and they even have drive-in stand-up comedy shows and things like that.
Really? I didn't hear about that.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting.
That's Chappelle did one down in Texas.
Well, Chappelle kind of took over a whole city, and it would almost be like this kind of mini Coachella or something like that, and everyone would be tested to come in, and then once in, it was kind of deemed safe or whatever, and they would kind of let it a little bit.
Yeah, I heard that he would just like go in Central Park and just bring a speaker and a microphone and just start going. I've heard he's done that. Now, I've heard that from Joe Rogan on his podcast, so I don't know how much of that's true or not. I doubt Joe would lie about that. But I just thought that was interesting that a guy like him, when he was big, and then didn't he have he got a big time contract for his Chappelle show, and that kind of freaked him out. And he walked away from it. And during that time that he walked away from it, he would go to Central and just started doing stand-up again.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think you could ever riff like that? Like just start just going off like that?
Well, just start not like that. I mean, I'm certainly not anywhere near. I mean, he's probably the best stand-up of the planet. Most people would consider. There are guys that just kind of get up there and you watch their whole act and they go for 15 minutes and you wonder, like, did they have any jokes in there that they plan? Like they just kind of talk to audiences and things like that, which, I get that, because your jokes get old, and sometimes, the best way to get an audience is to actually directly interact with them and talk about their job or all that kind of stuff. But then also you have, why are you there? Like you're there to craft your jokes and things like that. So it's kind of like this, if you only have 5 minutes, how much do you want to kind of waste on crowd work? Unless that's your thing. Some people, that's their thing. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I've kind of what John said, when he brought up the be funny, like when people be like, oh, you're funny. Go ahead. Tell me a joke. Be funny. That was what threw me off. Cause I kind of had the same deal where people were like, you should try stand up. And I'm like, no, that requires you like writing an act and writing, here's my 5 minute set. Here's my 10 minute. I mean, and I had no idea how to do any of that. But
how far are you away from Madison?
I'm literally halfway, literally the halfway point between Milwaukee and Madison.
Okay. So have you gone to the comedy club on State often? I mean, not now maybe, but
not now, but yeah, when we were younger, like in our 20s before kids and stuff like that, we went there quite a bit. I was a big fan of Comedy Sports, which was above Rocky Rococo's there. And that's the thing, improv, I think I could probably have been more successful at, but I didn't have anybody kind of pushing me in that direction.
Yeah.
You would have been good at that, Greg.
Well, and
improv for sure.
that's I think part of the like how I'm funny is playing off of other people or playing off a situation or something like that. I had no idea what improv was at the time, like when I was in college and taking a look at that, because I think the improv group that was in Whitewater was kind of real start and stop and not really well organized when I was there or something like that.
I was in there for a chunk of it.
Oh, really?
I was yeah.
Was it Space Monkey Mafia? Was that the name of it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember having the name.
Space Goat.
No, I don't remember. Maybe it was a different group. I remember being in a group with Erica Konis and
Oh yeah,
Christopher Paddock. Christopher that sounds wrong. Coming out, it's something like that. And then there's a few others, all kind of actory people.
Okay.
And I don't, I don't even remember how often we performed.
Did you guys go to that coffee shop in one of the dorms every once in a while?
I don't. It's just kind of all of the hate.
It's only been 25 years, Dan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's so anyway, what I was trying to get at was watching how different comics perform. And, I'm a big fan of John Mulaney, who is a storyteller, and he tells these great stories, partially anecdotal, partially just him kind of riffing on stuff. And then I watched, his name is just totally, I had it, and now it's gone. He was in Silicon Valley.
Is it Thomas Middleditch?
No. The Erlich Bachman character. He actually got in some trouble here a couple of years ago and doesn't work a whole lot anymore. He had crazy curly hair, kind of a bigger dude. Did a voice.
Carrot Top? Are you?
No, he did a voice in Big Hero 6.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. He was the cameraman in that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And,
yes. Cloverfield. Yep.
He's also the guy, the Deadpool's best friend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And
which TJ Lavin, right? No.
No.
TJ Lang. JD. I'm sorry.
TJ. JD.
We'll just throw out a bunch of
TJ Miller, right?
Yes, that's it.
There you go. There you go.
When you said TJ, it clicked for me.
Yeah.
I saw his stand-up, which was a lot of like interacting with the audience, and part of it, I'm just like, is he making this up? Like he's got almost an arena show.
Right. Well, he has sets like I see labeled on YouTube, like where he makes up the whole set on the spot.
Yeah.
And there are comics that do that.
And I look at that and I go, nope. I watched I think he had a special on HBO, and I'm like, this isn't funny.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, his audience was laughing, but I'm like looking at my wife. I'm like, are you getting into this at all?
Well, I will say, I mean, once COVID's passed, unless things have changed since I've been there, the Comedy Club on State was the best comedy club I've ever been in and performed for. I was able to get away with such subtle, clever jokes that I can't get away with some other places. They were just always receptive, and they'd listen to you, and they would reward you for being, clever or having something unique. So I mean, if I lived within 2 hours of that place, I would be there performing as much as I could. I haven't found anything comparable anywhere else. I'm sure there are places. It's a great club.
Hey Dan, is it addictive? That whole scene, is that addictive?
Was it one of the greatest feelings I ever get is coming up with a joke or a bit. And usually I'm really deadline orientated. So like if I know I have a show that night, like my brain kind of works double time. And sometimes I'll think of a bit or a joke, and there's this kind of tension and this excitement because you just don't know. You hope that the bit will go off well.
Right.
And when you get up there, and I get all the same nerves I got when I gave speeches in high school and college and stuff. When you go up there and something you wrote earlier that day gets like a big pop, a big reaction from the audience, like it's just like there's no,
nothing better.
It's a great wipe aside, whatever. It's like the greatest feeling.
Sure.
that can happen. You know, like it's just such a immediate, um, immediate, what you call like appreciation for a bit you just created out of the ether
Right.
that didn't exist. You know,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
know, it's just such a wonderful feeling.
Something you created is making people happy, and I totally get where that would be addictive.
Right.
Me
It's
too.
just a great feeling.
So I mean, it's just trouble. You know, comedy is a tough go. You know, and part of the reason I had such a trouble in New York is because you'd go to these shows, and you know, there would just be all comedians there. And you know, so you want to go and try to work your stuff, but then it's also like some of the people, their sets would just kind of degrade into ripping on each other and stuff, and it's like, well, you know, kind of, you know, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
You know, it's fun, I guess. You know, so it's just, if every comedy club on the planet was like the comedy club on State, I would do stand up way more often.
That's it. Once the world isn't on fire anymore, I think we'll check that out. My kids are finally old enough that I could be like, "Hey, mom and dad are leaving. You guys don't kill each other. We're taking off."
Here's what I would do if your goal is like, say, a year from now to hopefully things are back to normal, vaccine and all that stuff. What I did is I had like this little notebook I kept in my pocket, and anytime I thought of something funny, or anytime like I would say a line to people that would get a laugh, I would just remember like, oh, and I'd write that down and then try to recreate it with a punchline.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I remember one of my oldest jokes. I've retired this joke, but I was just talking to some other RAs at Whitewater, and they were talking about how they liked the smell of coffee, but they didn't like the taste of coffee. And I just said it not really to make a joke, just to kind of, and not really to shut them up. I just kind of said like, well, you know, you don't eat potpourri, you know, like this, you know, and I got a laugh, you know, and I wasn't really trying to be funny, but I got a big laugh, and I was like, oh, and then I wrote it down, and then I started kind of doing that punchline, and it would be like, oh, that's kind of a cute joke. And then I added a tag where I said, you know, I like to smell like gasoline, but I don't drink it, you know, and it was still like, oh, that's cute, or whatever. But then I found a one final twist where I would say, you know, I don't like to smell like gasoline, but I don't drink it. I huff it, you know, and that got like a big reaction. That joke. And so like, it's just this thing that was a throwaway line that if I didn't write it down, I probably would have totally forgotten about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of like build a joke around it, and then find where you can kind of build in a couple of twists and things, you know?
So I use sports analogies a lot, and I'm sorry that we keep kind of just hanging on this like stand-up comedian, but I've never really talked to stand-up comedians. So I wanted to always understand the mindset here. Is there a time where you almost get paralysis by analysis? Like you go through your bit too much? Like you break it down too much?
Oh, it's like too rehearsed?
Yeah, or
I mean, that is a danger that comedians run into, where they say their jokes so much, you have to make it sound like it's fresh, you know?
Right.
I mean, the Rolling Stones have to play Note Satisfaction as if like that is the first time they've ever played it, or else it just comes off flat, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's just one of some of the tricks and things you kind of learn as you're doing stand-up, is to try to make it sound like you're not bored of your own jokes, you know?
Right.
I mean, that's a legit skill, but usually when that happens, there's little things that happens, or like little mess ups, you know, or little, you know, things that'll be unique. And those are the things that you enjoy and you remember, you know? But yeah, I mean, that's just something you have to, you know, just like when you're in a play or something like that, you have to pretend like things are really happening, and you haven't done this 20 times in rehearsal, you know?
I'm currently a corporate trainer. And so it's kind of the same thing, where it's like, I do this training every week at the same time every week, but it's a new group of people. So you still got to be like, it's their first time hearing it. So then you have to make it sound like it's the first time you're saying it. So, yeah, I mean,
why did you get out of teaching?
Oh gosh.
You said 15 years you were a teacher?
Yep. I was a 15-year high school, sometimes middle school special ed teacher.
Okay.
And it, just the environment had changed enough. To me, there's really two sides to that job. There's the heart and there's the science. I was always very big on the heart, like, let's get the kids in, let's get them what they need, let's get them, anything to level that playing field and make them successful. And, being I'm tall, I'm big, um, but I could always relate really well. So they gave me some of the really tough kids to work with, especially those where they were in trouble. And so it'd be like go to jail or go to school. So they would come hang out with me. So I'd get to know these kids really well. And then sometimes I would just see the entire system just take a shit on them. And that was tough. And
Yeah.
at one point, and this was even pretty like probably middle of my teaching career, I saw a kid who he had submitted to NASCAR a new transmission. Like he had gone back to the design board and said, well, if I could do a transmission for a NASCAR, I'd do it like this. They were so impressed with his work. They're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay for you to have a full ride scholarship to one of the best tech schools in the country, which is in like Utah or something like that. We're going to, after we pay for your education, you're going to come to work at the NASCAR lab for as many years as you were in school. And then when that time is up, you can either choose to keep working for us or you can, you'll get picked up by a racing team as a mechanic or a, designer or whatever. But because that kid did not want to read Shakespeare and did not want to go to English 12, the school looked at him as a failing student. They looked at me as a failing teacher. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
So, fast forward a couple of years, probably another 5+ years after that. It was just kind of that, like, that's where I really started to notice the downhill slide of it was all about testing. It was all about, test scores, get the kids in, push a 4-year university on them, whether they want to go or not. That real switch from if a kid messed up or if a kid was struggling, okay, kid, what's going on? To if a kid messed up or a kid was struggling, hey, teacher, what aren't you doing? So you're getting pressure from parents. And most of the parents I worked with were absolutely great people. And so were the kids. But, you get a couple a year or something like that. And then the administration was more and more not taking the side of the teacher anymore. So I had 1 year where it was just like, I can't win in this district anymore. I'm going to move on. So I put in my resignation. And in that summer, as I was interviewing for jobs, I was like, this is just same shit, different pile. Like, I'm literally just going to trade it up and just be at a different geographic location.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I had another friend of mine that was working at a non-for-profit out of Watertown, Wisconsin. And they were like, well, why don't you come check us out? And I'm like, well, it's a population I never really worked with that much. She's like, no, we're looking for a corporate trainer. So it's a train the trainer kind of job. And they're looking for someone to run their LMS, their learning management system, because we're in 13 states. And so create the training and shoot it out across the web. And they need somebody to be that administrator. I went, oh, that's interesting. So that's how I got into where I'm at now. Still, I miss it in the fall, like right around where school starts and you're like buying school supplies and going to open houses, and it's still like the year is still full of possibilities and stuff. Yeah. I really miss that part, and I miss the kids. I mean, the kids were great, but now I got a daughter in high school, so I kind of when I talk to her and her friends are like, "Your dad's not afraid to talk to us." I'm like, not at all. Teenagers don't scare me. You're fine. So,
what do you miss about teaching, Dan? Do you miss teaching?
No, not really.
What'd you teach?
What grade?
Well, grade topic. Was it were you a grade level teacher? Were you an English teacher? Or?
So, being an English major, I took the English CSET and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I first got hired because I kind of graduated halfway through the year. Because what happened was I did New York, and then I met my wife in New York, and then we decided we wanted to have a family at some point. So we moved to California to be by her family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed it at that time that when we moved was during when the recession was really bad. it was really tough getting a job.
Mhm.
So if I'm being totally honest with you, I mean, I had this idea in my head, like I should be a teacher at some point, maybe, like that was always something in the back of my head.
Yeah.
And I had teachers in high school I really liked and all that stuff. So then we actually ended up opening up a couple of Little Caesars in Santa Clarita, California, which so we did that for a few years, and then it just really wasn't for us. So we left that, sold the stores, used all the profits we made to do IVF to have our kids, and buy minivan basically. And then they had this program at a local college where you basically, if you have a bachelor's degree, you can go for a year and you do your student teaching during the day, do your classes at night. And so I was able to become certified after 1 year. But so I wasn't a teacher very long. This was just, I don't know, 4 years ago.
Okay.
My first teaching gig, because again, I finished halfway through the year because there was issues with the last pregnancy and all that stuff. So I had to kind of postpone certain things. But I started out as what they call a success teacher. I don't know what they call it in Wisconsin. But it's basically the SPED kids that have such behaviors that they're separated. They're the kind of kids that if you just let them walk around freely, they get into fights, they get into whatever.
Yeah, my people.
Yeah. So so I basically taught all subjects to the same 12 kids all day.
Okay. So you're like an alternative school, more or less.
Within a normal high school, yeah.
Right.
We were kind of in the back and kind of whatever. But I've never been like a good disciplinarian. That's just not in my skill set.
Sure.
Even briefly, I worked for the parking service at Whitewater. Drove around and for parking for the football games. I was supposed to write tickets and things, and I never wrote a single ticket. Like I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Like
I couldn't bring myself to do it.
I just don't have that kind of like, there are some teachers, and maybe you had this, Greg, where they'll just like shoot the kids this look of like, I'm going to rip your head off. And you know that they're not going to rip the kid's head off. And the kid knows that they're not going to get their head ripped off. But for some reason, the kids buy in. And it doesn't matter how big they are. I kind of thought like, okay, well, I'm big and I have a deep voice. Maybe the kids will be intimidated. They're not intimidated by me.
Not at all.
But there'd be like this short lady who has this piercing look that would just shut these kids up immediately. And I was like, well, that's the classroom management is like the number one thing you need to be successful as a teacher. And it's just, it was just never anything I developed or had that ability. Maybe I would have eventually, but it wasn't like ingrained in me. It didn't come naturally to me. But ultimately, like the longer I was a teacher, well, first of all, I felt guilty because I would, some other fellow teachers of mine, like I'd look on Facebook and they'd always post these things about, reaching minds and, the greatest rewards of being a teacher, or like all these like inspirational things. Like they obviously bought in and they loved it. And me, like when I left the school, that's when I would do, creative things. And I didn't even think at all about the school. And I felt guilty about that. Like I felt like I wasn't actually like, I wasn't giving these kids enough of my,
sure. Okay.
I wasn't putting in enough to be a good enough teacher, but also the reality of SPED is that there are always teacher shortages. So it's not like I'm taking the spot of a great teacher out there. But I still felt guilty.
Just sounds to me like you weren't in your niche and you knew it.
Yeah. And honestly, like, like at the time I said, well, teaching is great because, summer's off and I have the same schedule as my kids and all that stuff. But I knew deep down the only reason, honestly, I went into special ed is because the economy was terrible. I had no marketable skills. And I knew that for SPED teachers, it's super easy to find a job. There's always demand for SPED teachers. And so part of it was almost like it was almost like a self-defeating thing I did to myself.
Yeah.
It was almost like here's a safe thing. And I kind of wrapped it. I kind of told people the story of well, I'd like to be a teacher. I'd like to summers off, all that stuff. But once I got in there, I just knew, it wasn't horrible, but I knew it just wasn't for me.
And if you don't have a passion for, especially when you're working with students with different disabilities or needs or whatever, if you don't have a passion for that, it can be miserable. I mean,
Right.
and that's, the burnout rate for a special ed teacher is usually around 5 years. So,
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, and there are, not to say that that's for everybody, but out of my graduating class from Whitewater, there was hardly anybody left that I knew of that was still a special ed teacher.
Yeah.
And I lasted triple the time. So I had 15 years, and I was like, I got to try something else. But that's honestly I think most teachers that I know that, in my opinion, if there's going to come a point in this country where, unless there's drastic changes, you're not going to see a late 40s, 50s something classroom teacher. You'll have people that are in their 20s and 30s doing full-time classroom teaching, but they're trying to grow into something else. Maybe still in the education field, some kind of administrator or something like that. But
they're going to burn out.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. I mean, the way the system is set up now, I mean, most teachers that are in their 50s that I know are miserable, and they're just counting the days until they can retire.
Well, and not only that, as soon as you get your tenure, you get stuck with this teacher. Like, the teachers that stick around for the most part tend to be kind of the clunkers that you can't get rid of.
Yeah.
Like they would have something egregious to fire them.
Mm-hmm. Wisconsin actually got rid of that rule. I know around here that they got rid of that rule, which I think was good, but then they got rid of a bunch of other ones where teachers just weren't protected anymore. And so we had a ton of teachers that, because they always said you needed a master's degree to make any kind of career out of it, just even from the pay scale. But then you had a bunch of teachers with master's degrees that if a district was running short on a budget, well, without that 10-year piece anymore, they're like, yeah, you can take a hike because you're too expensive. So it was definitely a double-edged sword, but I love teachers. I support them fully. I'm just happy to not be in it myself anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how bad would it be right now? Like, I've listened to some teachers. I've listened to some kindergarten teachers try to corral a class online, and it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine anything worse.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, part of me felt it was a bit easier in just that, because you could just mute them or whatever. Force them to work or anything.
That's the comedian coming out in you.
It's definitely, but I don't some of the kids that I knew I worked with. If I said, "Hey, you got to be on a Zoom call at 10 a.m.," they're gonna be like, "Yeah, sure thing," and then they're gonna have to be like, "Fuck yeah, I'm not doing that." There's no way I can get people on. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and just especially with SPED in particular, I mean, they that population do not do well with change and any sort of hurdles put in the way. Like the whole idea of, I remember talking to this one student and just saying okay, you need to log in here. And I sent her links, click here at 9:00. And it was just I couldn't get her to do it. It was just this one step she wasn't willing to take, or she just felt, I don't know exactly what was going on in her mind. But it was just any sort of barrier is just immensely harder when you have learning disabilities. Anything that's different than what they're used to.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
But let's talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, so I brought up the Mandalorian. We never got around to it.
No, we didn't.
This might be our last topic because we're going.
It's late for you guys. It's only 8:45 for me. Sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
We're fine. So you don't like the Mandalorian?
Well, I wouldn't say I dislike it.
Okay.
I still watch every episode. I'm just it's sort of obviously it looks really good, and it's acted fine and all that, and interesting things happen. It just feels like there's just so little that happens because they can't just come out and they're there's this mystery behind the origin of Baby Yoda and all that. They can't just come out and say it, because that's kind of like, the moment in Moonlighting when they kiss. It just kind of ends the show. Like that's kind of what the show is built around.
Yep.
And so you almost have all these kind of side adventures that don't really matter.
They're not moving the main story forward.
Right. And it almost feels like a bunch of filler episodes, which I would get if it was like a 24 episode something where you have filler episodes and all the exciting stuff happens at the beginning or the end of the season. But with only 9 episodes a season, 8 episodes a season, like it's just, there feels like too much filler. And it feels like, it's cool that they had a whole episode where they created this spider that was originally designed for Empire, and they kind of wrapped an episode around it. But then, besides just being a really cool Easter egg, what's the point? What did we learn about Baby Yoda? What did we learn about the Mandalorian? Did anybody grow as a character? It just felt like
that he likes eggs.
Could have been removed from the whole season, and nothing would be different.
Right. I actually get absolutely what you're saying there. That makes a lot of sense. I think. Do you think? And I'll throw this out to both of you. Do you think they fucked up with Yoda, and they're like, "Damn, I didn't think it'd be this big of a hit. Like, what do we do with this?"
I don't think so. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. They created a Baby Yoda. They knew that was going to be. I think part of the reason why I'm enjoying it as much as I do is because I have learned from Star Wars that as a fan growing up, I remember, I was born in 78, so I didn't get to see the first one in the theater. I saw Jedi as a child. I grew up knowing that Vader was, Luke's father. It's just been ingrained in me. But throughout the years, as an adult Star Wars fan, my expectations have gone from here kind of down to here. So when it comes to watching The Mandalorian, I'm going in with are we going to learn a lot about The Mandalorian or the culture or, the child or anything? I'd be like, yeah, probably not. And then I can just like sit back and have a drink and enjoy it.
Okay, so you shut it off.
I shut off my expectations for sure.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay. Dan, sounds like you haven't.
Well, like I said, I still watch it, and I don't dread it. I just feel like it's such a wasted opportunity because I don't know how many seasons we're going to get.
Right.
And the production value is off the chart. Like I said, it looks great, and it just feels like such a waste that they're spending time spinning wheels when you have such a great base to work from. Like, it just feels like a wasted opportunity to me.
Well, and the creators that they've gotten involved with, with Favreau and Filoni, and like this last episode was directed by Dallas Bryce Howard.
Yeah. Which was a good episode, this one. I understand the spider one. There was actually no point to that, really. Except it drove people nuts that an imaginary alien ate an imaginary alien's eggs. And people freaked out and tried to cancel out Yoda, that he was committing genocide and all of this crap.
But you have to understand, my wife and I also had an adverse reaction to that. And it's our own baggage, but going through IVF and going through miscarriages and all the money and the effort we went into to having children. And here's this woman who has the last of her eggs, and the baby eats it for comedic effect. Like, it just fell flat to us. And it just they could have done I guess an Olaf thing where what's his name tries to eat Olaf's nose over and over again, and then he finally gets the carrot and then he gives it back to him. Like, they could have done something like that, but maybe they felt that was too cheesy. He keeps trying to get an egg and then he finally gets one and then he gives it back to the mother. Like, maybe they felt like, oh, we can't do that. That's too safe or whatever. But
I thought for sure, because my whole family's freaking out. I'm like, I bet he's not really eating. Like, he's doing something with them.
Well,
maybe he's protecting them somehow.
I heard that. Here's my problem with, I don't know if it's just fandom overall, but anything, Game of Thrones, people have these crazy theories to explain why this and this and this happened.
Right.
And then you just hope that it's addressed sometime in the show or the book. And it's not at all. Like, they build up this big, and I think that's the problem. With the original trilogy, obviously you had the reveal of Darth Vader's the father, but it also, in the first movie, it wasn't set up to be this big mystery.
Right.
Like it was just, he mentioned his father and then that was it. And we never thought anything of it. So when the twist happened in Empire, like the reason we were surprised is because it was almost like we didn't even think that was going to be a thing. And then I think one of the fatal flaws of the newest trilogy was to set up Rey to have like, what is her background? What is her mystery? Or, all this thing. And then people would elaborate like, oh, he must be Obi-Wan Kenobi's daughter because she has a British accent and everybody else has, American accents. All, like going through all this stuff. And then it just ends up being like this disappointment. Like it's like they're like, oh, this great surprise. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just such a disappointing, like why put that in there if you don't have some awesome payoff? And I feel like Star Wars is falling into this trap. Like if you look at theories, everybody's like, well, this person is this person's father and this person is this person's brother. It's like, stop with the being related to people. Like Baby Yoda doesn't have to be the child of Yoda. Like it's a whole species. Like we don't need these twists and things like that, but people can't help themselves, and that's part of the problem when you have Baby Yoda as this mystery. People are going to build this great thing. And I guarantee you there's going to be no awesome payoff to it. It's just going to be like, oh, here's his family. Here you go, or whatever.
They're going to deliver him, and that's going to be.
He was cloned, and that's it. Whatever. It's just like it's not going to be satisfying.
Well, and I hope. I mean, and I think you're actually right in a lot of that with the build up, and we're not going to get any kind of payoff. I'm hoping with this whole High Republic line that they're going to come out with a whole new set of novels, new set of characters, essentially like a whole new Star Wars world. It's still Star Wars, but it's so far back in their history that they can do different stuff.
Right.
That it will recapture some of that greatness that it had.
Well, I have such trouble with Star Wars in general. I mean, what do you rank as the fourth best Star Wars movie?
The fourth best Star Wars
that's
movie?
a good question. Fourth best.
The first three, whatever. What's the fourth? A lot of people would go with 3.
Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah.
That might because there was a payoff. We finally saw him turn over, and even that wasn't that like that didn't pay off
that
either.
Good.
In my
you
eyes.
See, that's the novel was great. I really did enjoy the Revenge of the Sith novel.
It's a good question, Dan.
I mean, if somebody gave me $200 to rank the Star Wars movies, I would really have a tough time. I mean, I really have a tough time after the first 3.
Go for it, Dan. Rank. Try.
Do you have $200? I don't know, because I feel conflicted in my feelings. Because I obviously the newest trilogy looks great, and I think it's well acted. I just think, I just think 8 is such a flawed movie, and it sets all the wrong things in motion. And I actually like I actually like 8 the best out of the newest trilogy. And then I'm just disappointed by they're not having a cohesive storyline all the way through.
Yeah. Well,
And I think they mishandled several of the characters.
Yes, I believe so.
Isn't that studio interference? Isn't that what that really is?
Well, there was pressure. I mean, they bought Star Wars for $4 billion. And when they bought Marvel for $4 billion, they had movies on the docket. Like they had material ready to go, and they had movies in the past. So that was like a sound $4 billion investment. You knew you were going to see it. So Star Wars had nothing. So when they bought it for $4 billion, like they had to rationalize to their business partners and things like that this is going to be worth it. So they had to crank out movies, and so they just fumbled it. I mean, they were just if there was no pressure, if they actually would have taken the time to write a cohesive trilogy.
They're all Iron Man 3.
Oh, let me ask you a question. Does Rogue One or Han Solo count in that? Like, what's the fourth best one?
See, people knock Han Solo. I feel like I'm not trying to be contrarian. I like Han Solo, and
I think it's great.
I favor the new trilogy Rian Johnson movie. So I don't know.
Yep.
It
Yeah.
seems to be like not the opinion of the internet.
No, I loved it. I loved
I
it.
think it's a great movie. I think it's a great buddy heist film,
Yep.
and set in the
And,
Star
and
Wars
I'm,
universe.
and there was so much stuff about that actor not being good that it was like
great.
he was great, and I want.
Yeah.
I'm sad that there's not more. Like I want more
agree.
of those. You know?
I agree.
I do think they shoehorned too much into it. As far as like he got his outfit, his blaster, and like everything explained in this one movie, and then he's just like frozen in time until we see him again. You know, like you know, he didn't get a different blaster in all those years. You know, just you know, we had to.
Hey,
you know,
Dan, I threw out something to our viewers and our listeners one time. I want to know where you stand on this. I think Greg knows where I'm going with this. The last 3 Star Wars. Hang on, let me rephrase this. What was better, the last 3 Star Treks with Chris Pine, or the last 3 Star Wars?
wow.
So
What was worse? I mean, I think. Well, it's just tough because I just think Star Wars is such a near and dear to my heart that it's just it's like not a betrayal, but it was just like such a heartbreak that it was not done better, you know. And I was those people that thought, okay, you know, the best, you know, Star Wars movie is the movie that George Lucas didn't direct, you know, and didn't really write. So I'm thinking like, okay, maybe it actually gets better when he's not in the way. But I was totally wrong. Like, you know, I don't know if he's the special, you know, spice to get it going, but it just felt, you know, I don't know.
Maybe it was great for what it was at the time it was, and you can't recreate. You can't put that back in a bottle and just unleash it every other 2 years. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. I think the problem was when you start building on and you start trying to add on to a classic like that. Look, I understand the original 3. Let's see how Vader gets to this, because I think everybody wanted that. So I understand that. But after Luke beat his father, I've said this on the podcast 100 times already, that's where it should have ended for that story.
Yeah.
If you want to create something new, go for it. Like there's an entire universe out there, and that's what I like about the Mandalorian is that, like, I was a little disappointed when I saw a Baby Yoda. I was like, damn it, like they're not letting this stuff go.
Right.
Like, they're just going to keep like putting this in, and I'm, you know, and I got a little bit excited when I saw Boba Fett at the end. Sorry for the spoilers for those who haven't watched it. I like those that part was cool with me, but I want to see more about this Darksaber. I have no idea what the hell this is, and I'm not looking it up on purpose. I want them to explain it to me in storyline here. I don't want to have to look for on Wikipedia or whatever that thing's called.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, but yeah, I thought to me that was the whole problem with Star Wars, is that I felt I think it's The Force Awakens. It was a retelling of A New Hope, but in this, but they just did small little changes to make it a new story. That upset me, but I won't go into that. That could be another 20 minutes of me ranting.
Well, and yeah, you know, like I was just disappointed that there was. First of all, it was at least 1 through 3. If you like looking back at it now, I don't think they were successful films. So at least he was going for something else. Like he wasn't just exactly copying what he had done. You know, he was trying to do some political intrigue and all that stuff, which, you know, maybe not a kid's movie, but at least like he was trying not to just repeat, you know.
Yes.
There were some themes he repeated and things like that. The problem I have with 7 is they give no explanation, and maybe it's in books. I don't care. It doesn't count. Like there's no explanation on where the First Order got all their ships. Like it made sense that the Empire had all these ships because we understood vaguely there was some kind of governing body that you assume they have taxes, and so they had the full might of their forces. Where did the First Order get their stuff? It feels so draining that this war that you felt was, you know, wrapping up when they blew up the second Death Star has just been dragging on. And then you have a character, like I'm disappointed in the character of Finn because I think it's so interesting to have a character that was a former stormtrooper But then you introduce this guy and they introduce these ideas that some or all the stormtroopers were like kidnapped kids and then brainwashed. And so like he has no remorse of shooting stormtroopers. Like how interesting of a conflict would it be if he's like, I want to escape all that, but I don't want to shoot these people who are basically my family, the only family I've ever known. You know, like there was nothing. It just went straight into jokes. You know, like he had no problem going from like, let's escape, blasting these people. You know, it's just like, I don't know. There could have been interesting stuff there, you know.
No, I think you're right. I think what you're wanting, it sounds to me like you want Game of Thrones. You want an in-depth analysis of every character step, and I don't think Star Wars.
I don't need that. I need something to tell me why the First Order has all these resources. Something. Okay. It'd make much more sense if it was like they somehow collected the remaining
eBay
sources, or there was some kind of like, you know. Like, so, it would actually be more interesting if they were also limping along and didn't have unlimited ships, you know. Right. But the fact that they could build a Starkiller base, the base gets blown up. Oh, that's unfortunate. Let's, you know, it doesn't slow them down. Like they still, you know, like nothing, not, you know, something just to explain what's going on.
The downside, and like I said, I've read the books, is that they don't fully explain it, but they do offer some points in the books, which I still think is then a failure of the filmmakers, because you can't expect everybody that wants to go read the three novels that happen in between the movies or anything along those lines. It's overall a giant missed opportunity that I hope someone is paying attention to. Like I think maybe like when Kathleen Kennedy is out, and I hope Jon Favreau becomes the new like Star Wars czar, because I think he's got the right kind of fanboyish piece to put in there.
Well, obviously the realities of COVID. I mean, they're talking about the Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they're talking about the Boba Fett series, you know. So yeah, obviously, you know, Mandalorian's doing well. So I mean, they might just steer in this direction for a while, until theaters are back into, you know, normality.
Yeah. I think you guys are right. Bottom line, that it was a missed opportunity for to carry something on, to add something new. I think that's what I'm starving for. I was done with the Skywalker saga. I didn't give a shit about Rey. I didn't care who her family was, because I knew it was going to end up becoming. She was going to be related to somebody. I was just waiting to see who she was going to be related by, and. Like
why set that up? Why put that emotion and not have
That's what I'm saying.
And J.J. Abrams did that without knowing the answer himself. Like he just decided because there was this big reveal in Empire. Like what is our big reveal of parentage going to be? And it's like, you don't have to have one. You know, like that doesn't have to be a thing.
Right.
Well, and you know, so her dad was a clone of Palpatine. Who was her mom? Like, who falls in love with Palpatine's clone? How does that work out?
That's a good point.
Doesn't matter. Throw it away.
Yeah. So I think we'll end it there. Dan, tell us about your podcast real quick, where people can find you, where they can listen to it.
Well, my primary podcast is called The Shared Shutter. That's the one I do with my wife. It's photography and film related. The one I do more sporadically is just called Dan's Interview Show. And I interview random people that I have met, interesting people along the way. Did you guys happen to know who Nick Martin is? I'm going to interview him at some point here coming up.
No,
he went to Whitewater. That's why I bring him up.
So that name sounds familiar.
He's an interesting guy because he was a professional mountain biker, moved to Colorado. You know, professional mountain bikers make nothing. He started, the only thing he got was free gear from, you know, this nice gear. And so he started selling extra gear online. Buddies of his started giving him his gear, or giving their gear to him to sell. And he built up this humongous eBay store. And he now has like 3 physical locations and this huge e-space built up. And it's just, if you knew him, like he's just not like what you would consider like a business-minded guy. Like he's always been kind of a free spirit, you know, kind of thing. So I'm always interested in the journey, like how you become, you know, he just kind of leaned into the mountain biking thing and then kind of found a path,
Right. Yeah.
And I find
Absolutely.
that journey really interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. That
Cool.
sounds like a good one. I'm looking forward to it. Nick Martin, right?
Yeah. Well, I have he just So we'll see when that one comes. But I have some
Very
other
cool.
ones, a few Whitewater grads, a few Omid of Tahi, who's in American Gods, and
Yep.
That was a good
Man,
one. I enjoyed
That was a good one. I enjoyed listening to that one.
and
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
all right. Well, thanks,
All
guys.
right.
Thanks for staying up late.
Hey, real quick, we always end one with a fact of the day. You want to hang out for that, or do you want to disconnect and not be any part?
It's only 9 o'clock here. I'm good.
All right. Here we go. This is a random fact. I just click a button and it comes up. So we'll see what happens here. In 1984, Robert Patrick, the T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day, swam for 3 hours to rescue people after a boat accident on Lake Erie, nearly drowning in the attempt. Oh, good for you, Robert.
Oh,
Wow.
I mean, he saved a bunch of people. That reminds me of Mark Harmon. Remember that dude? Mark Harmon
sure.
from
NCIS.
Yeah, he saved somebody got in a really bad car accident. He pulled out the lady while the car was on fire and like it exploded. Like it was like real action hero stuff. Like 15 seconds after he pulls her out, the car explodes or something like that.
Harrison Ford rescues people.
Yes. Didn't he like a plane crash or something, right? Didn't he run into
No,
that?
he crashed.
Sometimes stranded hikers and things.
Yeah, that's cool. So,
Good for them.
all right. Hey, Dan, thank you very much for being on the show. Appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Sorry. Sorry.
Johnny's dying.
I got choked up there, Dan. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Everybody, if you get a chance, please look at his two or listen to his two podcasts. They're entertaining, informative. I had a good time. As for the Greg, Johnny, we're out of here, guys. Take care. See you next week.
Have a good
Bye.
one.
All right.